Welcome to all the participants and our speakers. My name is Andreja and I'm the moderator of the Resilience Tracks session. Today we have a special guests who are speakers from all over the world. They will share with us their knowledge and experiences about resilience. Each speaker will have 15 minutes for the presentation. If you will have any questions for them, please write them down in the question answer window. You will find the question answer button on the right side of your screen, but first you must choose the session button. At the end of the session, we will have 15 minutes for your questions for all three speakers. The first speaker is from Malaysia, Mrs. Iris Tan. She is a Director of Operations and Corporate Communications at ARTDO Group and also PJK, PMC and ARTDO training professional. Her topic is Calm After the Storm. She will be talking about overcoming challenges as a senior management corporate lady boss and transformation at workplace. Mrs. Iris Tan, the word is yours.
Thank you, Andrea. Good evening and greetings from Malaysia. 9 years ago, 6 a.m., early morning, a nudge and a frantic pat on my shoulders, a painful cry from my soulmate and partner for nearly 30 years, my dearly beloved husband. He said to me, "Mommy, can you bring me to the hospital? My stomach is very painful." I jumped out of bed immediately, asked him if he was ready to go. He said yes. A quick wash of my face, brushing of teeth, and a change of clothes. Walked with him down the stairs, slowly to the car, and off to the hospital we went. I can still recall those very moments. I was 51 years old and had worked in one of the most leading English newspaper group in Malaysia for 21 years. Now, driving to the hospital was like the longest journey in my life because it was the morning traffic jam time. And hearing my husband groan and moan in intense pain was immense agony to me. When you love someone very much, when the person is in pain, you will feel the pain too. And that was how I felt. We finally reached the emergency section of the hospital. The doctor said my husband had suffered a burst ulcer and had to be operated on as soon as possible. My husband stayed in hospital for about a week. Then he came home only to stay and recuperate for another 2 weeks. But after that, his body weakened and had to be readmitted to hospital again. Much to all our shock and surprise, his health took a turn for the worse. He went into ICU, then fell into coma and suddenly passed away of septic poisoning. And there I was, overnight an instant widow at 51 years old, at the prime of my life, so successful in career, and yet this had to happen. My 2 children were only 17 and 10 years old. At that time, I did ask God above and even question myself, why me? All my peers and friends, their husbands were still with them. Life and death works in mysterious ways. Why are some chosen to leave this world earlier than others? It is also said that one of the most stressful experiences one can go through is the loss of a partner. The first year was truly a sorrowful year for me, as I had to come to terms with being alone, minus husband, a single parent, and having my 2 children solely dependent on me in all ways. My life, my work, and my priorities, they all had to be reorganized. Much as I was crying secretly in my room and in the shower, but I knew that I had to survive and live on. I had to be strong. On this note, I would also like to caution the ladies here that there are men out there that seem to pry on widows and single women. Upon the death or even separation of a partner, a woman can be very vulnerable and can be exposed to cheats and scammers as I was. So ladies, do be very careful if you are ever in such a situation. On another rather interesting note, You may also lose some girlfriends, as I did. For those girlfriends feared that this merry widow and once again single lady may go after their husbands. Alas, after 9 years, today I am still happily single. Nevertheless, the death of a husband was one chapter of my life that I finally came to accept, and had to move on. At that point of time, there were also changes in my organization. New bosses came in with new ways of doing work. Changes we all had to accept, including a change to my very own position, portfolio, and responsibility. Though still a senior management head, I was no longer in charge of corporate event marketing, which was my expertise, strength, and forte for over 20 years in the company. I was even transferred out to another city to handle government relations for a year and a half. Subsequently, brought back to headquarters to be in charge of admin, building services, occupational safety and health, and later, property management and development. I spent the remaining last 9 years of my working life in the company before I retired, doing work that was not what I was employed for, trained for, or specialized in. This is nothing new in many organizations. Changes, they are all inevitable. And some of you may have experienced this, where you get knocked out of your comfort zone, no more in your cozy corner, a whole new and unfamiliar workplace. But I had decided I would take on whatever new jobs they assigned me to as an opportunity to learn new things and to enrich myself in knowledge, in technical know-how, and in gaining new job experience. One must always try to be positive and to see goodness in a situation or an opportunity. I must say that now and today, apart from being an expert on corporate event marketing, I can also handle company administration and property management. Though I retired from working 30 years in my last company last August, I did manage to be re-employed this June and is currently in a very senior position in a company that is poised to be listed again in the stock market. In fact, my present job deals with operations, and much of the work knowledge and experience was acquired from the job transformation that had happened to me during the last 9 years before I retired. As Albert Einstein once said, an important source of knowledge is experience. So, ladies and gentlemen, knowledge is never wasted. After the death of my husband, whilst I was facing job challenges in the office, I received my third blow. What a hat trick indeed. Both my kidneys were found to be functioning at only 25%. A healthy person's kidneys need to be functioning at 60% and above. And that was in the year 2013. The doctor told me then that my kidneys would not be able to be any better, but depreciate by about 5% each year. And in about 4 years' time, I would be needing dialysis. His words rang true, for both of my kidneys really broke down in 2017. 3 of my siblings came forward offering to donate a kidney. Even 2 friends kindly offered to donate their kidney. But in Malaysia, we can only accept a donated kidney from a family member or a relative. My younger brother from Singapore was found to be suitable and had to fly to Malaysia to undergo several medical tests over several months. I felt thankful to God, but that hope was short-lived and dashed as just a month before my transplant was to take place, my younger brother had a mild stroke, thus denying him of donating his kidney to me. Again, I asked God, why have you forsaken me? My eldest child, my son, was still studying in the university, and my daughter was in secondary school. Having a kidney problem and being on dialysis, one's life and how long one lives or survives is never certain. But I never gave up. More so because I knew I had to find a solution, for I had to live on. Just for some years to see that my 2 kids can go through their university. Finally, after agonizing for about 9 months, plus 3 months of dialysis, and searching for a solution, plus lots of prayers, call it luck or miracle, a divine intervention, I managed to do my kidney transplant in May 2017. And 2.5 months after my transplant, I had flown to Lisbon, Portugal for an international NGO meeting, and then to one of my most favorite cities in the world, London, for a 2-week holiday. Since then, ladies and gentlemen, there has never been a dull moment in my life. Not a day passes by without a thank you prayer to God for this second chance to live on, and for a family, relatives, and friends that are always there to give me the support I need. By the way, if you think you can live alone and be happy, it is not so. No man or woman is an island. We need our family, relatives, and friends. Having a good and close network of family members and friends is important, as studies have shown that one is happier and live longer if one has friends and able to connect and communicate with others. So let us all enjoy our lunches, teas, and dinner, get-togethers, chit-chats, and friendships that come our way. However, a word of advice, do make sure you make friends with those that are positive, for if you have negative friends, they will make you all the more depressed and disappointed with life, and you will eventually not be a happy person. Now, being retired and having all grown-up kids also doesn't mean that life can be boring and at the end of the road. On the contrary, so. I'm now able to pursue my interests and passion on my own sweet time. Cooking, baking, meeting friends, partying, traveling, DAYL, do as you like. I'm even taking classes on subjects that I like and want to learn more. For learning something new stimulates one's mind, which is also healthy for us mentally. In summary, let me say this: never ever give up on yourself. You must make efforts to bounce back in life when you feel low, down, and out. One of the things that I like to do when I feel kind of depressed is to watch a really funny movie, especially one that can make me laugh so much. And I often feel so much better after that. Last but not the least, please know that you have others who love you. Sometimes you never know, for you may also have secret admirers too. So do live on to be secretly admired. And never ever give up on this life because you have been blessed to live this life. Let me now say a very big thank you to ARTDO International and ITD World Malaysia for inviting me to this session. And thank you to all of you for your very kind attention in listening to my story. Hopefully we can all meet in person next year. Stay safe and healthy always, and happy week ahead.
Thank you to Mrs. Tan for sharing her story with us. Our next speaker comes from United States of America, Mr. Peter Illig. He's an international attorney and a strategist for nonprofits. He's a CEO at National Certification Council for Activity Professionals. His topic is return to the abnormal. He said, while many long for a return to normal, the reality is that we are preparing for a new world that is abnormal. Mr. Peter Illig, the word is yours.
Good morning. A warm welcome this morning in Washington, D.C., where it's below freezing. My name's Peter Illig. I know a number of you from my previous work with World Scouting, and it's wonderful to be included in this global conference. I stand before you to address the abnormal from the perspective of the organization I run, NCAP, which deals with long-term care of the elderly. But I'd like to start with setting some context, some scope and scale. So I stand here before you virtually as one of 7.5 billion people alive today. Each one of our bodies has 37 trillion cells that are interacting normally, and our hearts will beat approximately 100,000 times today. Now, on a macro level, we all live on the earth, right? And the earth revolves around the sun. The sun is so massive it would hold 1.3 million Earths within it. And we're told that in the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy we live in, there are 100 billion stars. And the vastness of our Milky Way galaxy is so great, it would take 100,000 years traveling at the speed of light to cross it. Yet we all exist here on this one planet in the midst of a global pandemic. So how is that working for us? Over the past year, the headlines have been quite dramatic. We've seen scope and scale indicating record illness and death. Now, it is normal for the human condition to experience illness, sickness, and death, but the rates that we're experiencing it are abnormal. It's disrupting society. It's disrupting economies. It's disrupting our lives. So when we say abnormal, this is the definition I chose: to deviate from what is normal in a way that is undesirable or worrying. And the Latin root of abnormal is abnormis, which means monstrous. So, what is abnormal? Interestingly, this is the cover of the Washington Post magazine the day before I submitted my presentation. And I felt it was important to include because I think you know who this is referring to. And what this particular article focused on were things that were perceived to be a deviation from the norm, worrisome, troublesome, and out of the ordinary. Things like abuse of power, not working with allies, politicizing the military. But there's a distinction between an abnormal experience that was freely chosen as a result of the election and what we're experiencing now as nature imposing a pandemic upon all of us, all of humanity. So I'd like to make it personal. This is Susan. Susan is a registered nurse for over 25 years. She works at a skilled nursing facility in New York. She's in charge of education. One of the things she primarily focuses on is the use of personal protection equipment. You can see the mask, the face shield, the use of gloves and gowns to prevent the spread of infection. Now, as part of Susan's employment, she must get swabbed or tested 2 times each week to make sure she doesn't have COVID. Additionally, if she were to leave New York State, upon return, she would have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks, unpaid. So she's never left the state. Now, Susan is my sister. I have not seen her in person for over a year. We do FaceTime, we do speak on the phone, but what we're experiencing as siblings is abnormal. The primary response to infection control is to avoid the spread of the virus. And that's why there's mandatory social distancing. We have had legal orders at local, county, state level for mandatory stay at home, mandatory shelter in space. Now, all that is leading to social isolation. And humans are social by nature. It's normal and necessary to socialize. But one of the abnormal outcomes of this is an incredible increase in rates of depression, mental illness, and suicide. Another dramatic example of the impact of the pandemic is on end-of-life experience. In the long-term care space where I work, people are now dying alone and in isolation. The last visit and the final goodbyes many are having is done virtually. There's a new role for healthcare workers to arrange the final goodbye on Facebook or Zoom or on the phone. So what's the response been? We've seen extreme responses to all this attempt to deal with the abnormal of the pandemic. We've seen individuals express their opinion that wearing a mask is an imposition on their freedom. We've seen individuals equate social distancing for their own protection on extreme controls like communism. The conference themes of rejuvenating, reinventing, and resilience set the context for dealing with the abnormalities of the global pandemic. Adaptation is what is occurring. The ability to rejuvenate, the ability to reinvent, the ability to be resilient all help us to adapt. And I submit that resilience is the emotional and psychological resource to adapt to those deviations from our normal. Now, here's an example: telehealth. Telehealth has been one of the biggest contributors to resilience. It's been talked about for over a decade. There's been a 2,000% increase in the use of telehealth. More telehealth visits have occurred in the past 10 months than have occurred in the past 10 years. Robotics and technology are contributing to resilience during this global pandemic. It's primarily driven by infection control. In long-term care, robotics and technology are being used to deliver medicine, track medicine, drive exercise, access music, videos, communication with loved ones, all things to stimulate physical, mental, and psychosocial well-being. And the technology is here to stay, primarily driven by cost savings. However, we have yet to see the long-term impacts of human-machine interaction. Now, here's something I believe we've all experienced, and perhaps even now, is the resilience needed for teleconferencing. While you might only be looking at me right now, we've all experienced large screens with many faces, and we occur to each other in a flat, two-dimensional world the size of about 1 square inch. No longer are we in an interactive three-dimensional experience. We try to focus on that little 1-inch square of someone speaking or turning on and off their camera, and it's hard to see facial cues. And how many of us are really going to admit that we spend a lot of time looking at ourselves, which of course the telltale signs of adjusting your tie or your glasses or your hair. So that's a new reality. Now, despite all these abnormalities, there's some really interesting experience of practical resilience. This is a pizza oven in New York City. A restaurant invested in this expensive piece of technology just before the COVID pandemic hit. And the infection control restrictions on having visitors into the restaurant or even the takeaway of pizza slices, that business model was blown up. Yet the resilience of this entrepreneur realized that the temperature of this oven was hot enough to melt plastic. So with an additional investment, the owner of this restaurant and of this new pizza oven is now making plastic face shields to contribute to infection control. So by extension, we see the resilience that can be used to support maintaining traditional cultural performances, as seen here in this lovely photo. Now, another example closer to home is through Crossway Community. Crossway Community is a 4-acre campus that has housing, about 40 housing units, has a Montessori school, has a conference center and offices, and it's where my organization, NCAP, is co-located with a Montessori intergenerational center. It's also a location where ARTDO International has a presence. You can see the design of the facility. It's beautiful, it's open, it facilitates interaction and socialization. However, due to COVID restrictions, they either had to close or adapt. So what did they do? In an amazing pivot, a resilient example is they became a forest school. A forest school is a European model where the children attend classes outside throughout the day. They had to invest in additional shelters. They ensure the children have the right clothing. But because of this resilient shift, they've been able to maintain enrollment and they've had 0 infections. So I'd like to draw your attention to one of the resources that I've chosen and selected as a source for inspiration for Resilience. And that's the book, Thank You for Being Late, by Thomas Friedman. Now, the subheading, which is written to the side here, sets the context by emphasizing optimism, an optimist's guide to thriving in the age of accelerations. The book optimistically positions technology and connectivity for unimaginable collaboration and creativity. In the context of the global pandemic, I submit that optimism is a necessary predisposition for resilience. Optimism, the proverbial glass half full over half empty, is defined as a hopefulness and confidence about the future. Optimism is the spark that ignites our resilience. Optimism is an attitude that supports our resilience to ultimately thrive again. Now, the final concept I'd like to leave you with is dynamic stability, to stay ahead of the rate of change. What you see here is a photo of a kayaker. The kayaker is present in a challenging, unpredictable, and constantly changing environment. The kayaker must paddle as fast as the water is moving around him just to maintain his present position. The kayaker must paddle faster than the water is moving in order to advance. So, in closing, our abnormal world requires us to be dynamic. We must maintain optimism if we're to apply our resilience in order to adapt and to thrive again. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Peter Illig. Now our last speaker also comes from United States, Dr. Tanvi Gautam, leadership founder and the winner of Game Changer Awards by Workforce magazine in United States of America and a social media influencer in HR. Her topic is Leading During Uncertainty, Resilience as a Strategic Leadership Skill. She will be speaking about how uncertainty requires a new mindset that is able to allow experimental thinking and a new approach to the processes and outcomes. Dr. Tanvi, the word is yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. How is everybody doing? You know, I feel like I'm talking to the camera all day long. So give me a sign of life. Can you go to the chat and tell me in one word, just how are you feeling right now? Just one word, okay? No more than that. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. You better talk to me, okay? So that I feel like I'm not alone. Guys, like I'm exhausted. I'm with you guys. All of us are exhausted out of our brains. And we have somebody who's saying, I'm connected. I'm feeling connected. Yes. Isn't it wonderful? Right here in this room right now, we have got people from so many different parts of the world. I saw someone from Phnom Penh. I saw someone from Malaysia and the Middle East. And inspiring. Poonam is feeling great. Jacob is feeling uncertain. You're in the right session, Jacob. Okay. Hyunbee is feeling grateful, cheerful, sleepy, but staying awake for you. Oh my God, Dr. Low. Now I just have to make sure I hit it out of the park just for you. Thank you for staying awake. I know it's late in Australia. All right. So let's get started, shall we? Before I begin, let me give you a little bit of background apart from all the formal things you heard about me. I spend about 80% of my time with the corporate world, a lot of the time with the C-suite, thinking about leadership development in organizations. And I spend about 20% of my time at the university. So if you see me getting very professorial, you know where that is coming from. Okay. And what I want to do today is I said, I'm not going to do any slides because we're all turning into Zoom bees, not zombies, yeah? Zoom bees. There's just been too much of Zoom going around. So I said, forget the slides. I'm just going to talk to you, right? And that's going to make sure we have a real conversation, even in the virtual world. So the red thread through my work is leadership in the age of disruption. And What this means is that I'm going to share with you some insights on what I'm seeing working with organizations and leaders across the globe. And you can think about how does this apply to you and what can you possibly be doing differently to lead in a world of uncertainty. Because let's face it, all of us grew up in a linear world. But now we have to lead in the world of disruption. And I tell you, mark my words, the crisis is the curriculum. Right now, what you're experiencing in terms of this crisis is the curriculum of what great leadership is made of. This is prime time for you and your organizations to get ready for whatever the future might throw at you. Right? We used to lead in what I used to call the railroad model of leadership. You got in at one end, the train went on a rail, you got off at the other end, you know where you're beginning, you know where you're stopping. And like Peter said, we are now in the whitewater world of leadership, where you are navigating the currents as they are coming, and you have to be prepared for anything and everything. Yes or no? Give me a yes in the chat box so I know you're still with me and you haven't run away to the other session. Yes, says Ajay. Yes, says Andy. Yes, says Jacob. Yes, says Guy. Perfect. You guys are with me. I like it, Poonam. Thank you so much, James and Dr. Lowe. So you have to be prepared for both the imagined future and the unimagined one, because here's the thing I am 1000% certain about the future, which is that it will arrive whether you prepare for it or not. Sounds self-evident, but believe me, we don't often realize that. So people define resilience as bouncing back. It is about bouncing back, but at the heart of it, resilience is about capacity and capability building. Do you have the capacity, the reserves, the overflow to handle an uncertain future? Now, this is the point at which some of you might turn to me and say, well, that's very good, but if I don't know the future, how am I supposed to prepare for it? Fair question. Excellent question. Let's pursue that line of thought. I don't know the future, so how can I prepare for it? Well, step number one, you have to have what is known as radical openness to face the future, whether it meets your prediction or not. Certainty, whereas it's a very safe place, is actually a temporary state. Uncertainty, on the other hand, is highly anxiety-provoking, but it is filled with potential. When we don't know what is possible, anything is possible. And if we take a positive attitude to that, we will make something out of nothing. So how do you prepare for this future, this radical openness? And it's a good idea, but it's so pie in the sky, Dr. Tanvi. Can you give us something tangible? Absolutely. Dr. Lowe is staying up in Australia just for me. I am going to give you something tangible. Okay. So the number one skill, let me see if you guys can guess, yeah? Because I like to talk. I don't like to keep talking to the camera. What do you think is the number one skill that can prepare you for meeting an uncertain future? Let me take a guess. What, according to you, is the number one skill? I have my opinion, and there's no right or wrong answer. So go ahead in the chat room. What do you think is, according to you, the number one skill we need to meet an uncertain future? Because, well, how am I going to teach something? They say that, we are preparing our children in schools for a future jobs that may not exist. So some of you are saying agility, great, interpersonal skill. Eric says resilience. Hey, Eric, good to see you in Netherlands. All right. James says calmness, flexibility. Tatel says agility. Yeah, so you're all in optimism. Yes, Komal. So we are all in the ballpark. The number one skill, as I see it, has to do with your ability to reinvent and repurpose what you already have. So let me give you an example. I was talking to the head of Singapore Changi Airport, and she was sharing how with the grounding of flights, a lot of the cabin crew of Singapore Airlines has had to be repurposed into healthcare ambassadors. Think about it. I'm pretty sure the cabin crew never signed up for being healthcare ambassadors, but their excellent customer service skills, their attention to detail, their ability to respond in a crisis. If a plane is going to crash, you better know what the escape route is. So you have these fabulous set of skills. And the question became, I can't apply them in the context that I'm in because the plane is not flying. So then where else can I apply it? And they repurpose the skills in an adjacent world of healthcare where it was really needed. So when you think about reinventing and repurposing, start thinking in terms not just of competencies or skills, but where can it be reapplied and repurposed? We had never thought that Louis Vuitton, of all people, is going to make hand sanitizers and masks. And yet that happened. In India, the Mahindra Group took its resorts and hotels and turned them into hospitals. That's called repurposing. If you are going to sit in uncertainty and you are going to say, oh my God, woe is me. What do I do? My industry is going down. That's the end of it. Because yes, a lot of industries will shut down during this crisis and uncertainty, but a lot of industries will also be born. Okay, I'm talking too long. Let me have a look in the chat. Are you guys with me? Yes, does this make sense? This idea of reinvention and repurposing. Can someone give me a yes? Good. Komal saying yes. Aben Kennedy is saying yes. Tanuvelu is saying yes. Poonam is saying yes, 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 yes. Good. We're all on the same page. The other idea that I want to leave with you is, thank you, Andy. What can we dream up, says Guy. Exactly. You're my guy. What can we dream up? Okay. So earlier this year, I introduced a concept of the quadrant of crisis. It's a brand new framework. I only talked to a few people about it. So you guys, you are my crowd because you're hearing it right here, right? Quadrant of crisis. What does it have to do with you? When you are hit with uncertainty, what happens to us many times is we become very, very narrowly focused on what is exactly in front of us right now. Right? It's kind of like the scene of accident. If there's a head-on collision, someone is bleeding, your first job is to stabilize the patient. Not start asking, were they drunk? Did they have the license? Do they have the papers? No, you're going to stabilize the patient, correct? So our first response as leaders is to start attending to the most immediate thing which is in front of us, and that's understandable. But the most immediate thing we are attending to may not be the most important. And so the quadrant of crisis asks you to create this 2x2. You've got these 4 quadrants. One, which looks at the organizational level. What are you going to do to stabilize the organization? Quadrant number 2 is at the team level. How are you stabilizing your teams? Because here's the thing. Tell me if you agree with me. High-performing leaders are going nowhere with low-performing teams. Do you agree with me? You can hire really high potentials, but high-performing leaders are going nowhere with low-performing teams. So you have to stabilize at the team level. The third quadrant is the interpersonal level, and then the fourth is the individual level. Now, let me tell you this. And Andrea, let me know how I'm doing on time, because I can talk for 3 days on this topic, yeah? So yes. I have 5 minutes, good. And hopefully we'll talk more later, right? But I am the least impressed, and that includes some of the organizations that are here right now. Even though I haven't worked with you, I have worked with enough organizations to make some generalizations. So if this is not you, congratulations. If this is you, you better listen up. I am extremely unimpressed with the way organizations have been handling the interpersonal and the individual level of response to uncertainty. For example, if you have had toxic managers in the real world, when these toxic managers, these micromanagers go into the virtual world, they don't magically transform into people leaders. In fact, under pressure, they may actually revert to their least expected behavior and become more toxic. become more micromanaging because they're trying to exert control. What has been done to support the leaders who are supporting your people? And the knee-jerk reaction of most organizations when a crisis happens is, oh, you know what, we're going to cut down the learning development budget, the training budgets, we don't want to invest in it. I get it. But there is a Harvard Business Review article. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, let me see if I can paste my LinkedIn profile here. Yeah, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, it's in the chat. I will share with you the link to the Harvard Business Review article, which looked at the fact that in the last recession, the companies that had a knee-jerk reaction to cutting staff, cutting training, were the last to come out of the recession, or they did not come out at all. I'm not saying this. Harvard Business Review has got data on the last recession to show you that. So we need to stop these knee-jerk reactions. And at the individual level, the support strategies for people have been ad hoc and not strategic. Last week, I ran for one of my clients this program that I designed literally last month called Hit Reset on 2020 and how to get into 2021 with a sense of hope and resilience. And I tell you, the kind of conversation we had on that 90-minute masterclass, the vulnerability, the emotions, the overload, people are up to here. They are up to here right now. And organizations are not doing enough to help release that pressure, attend to them and make them feel supported. Understand that there are emotional needs of clients, and Peter talked about a lot of what is going on. Iris's own story has not been an easy one. These are individual stories that need to get supported. And the last thing I will say to you that I think you need to work on when you are in a state of uncertainty. By the way, if any of you want to know more about Hit Reset, you can again connect with me on LinkedIn. The last thing I want to leave you with, because I think my time is almost up, is that we really need to pay attention to psychological safety. When you're navigating an uncertain world, you need all ideas to be on the table. You need people. What is psychological safety? Are you guys familiar? But see, this is where the professor comes out. Are you familiar with psychological safety? Some of you, I'm pretty sure, are familiar with psychological safety. It is the ability to share our ideas and thoughts without fearing the repercussion of what it might do to my status in the group or my job in an organization. All right. So psychological safety, look it up. There's a lot of literature on that. So psychological safety, the ability of people to call out others, challenge others, speak up, feel like they are being seen, heard, and understood. I do a lot of work on inclusion and diversity. I run the Global Women in Leadership program for the last decade. So this is a conversation close to my heart. People were not feeling seen, heard, and understood pre-pandemic. And it's only become worse during the pandemic. So how can you create that greater sense of psychological safety and trust in organizations? And no, the answer is not more technology, because artificial intelligence is absolutely no match for natural stupidity. On that note, I will stop. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gautam. Now I will invite Mr. Illig and Mrs. Tan to again join the session. Now it's question-answer time. So let's go through the questions from our participant. The first question we have for Mr. Peter Illig. How to revitalizing resilience that is a thought by vital political challenge during COVID-19?
I had some breakup of your question. Can you repeat it?
Yes. How to revitalizing resilience that is a thought but vital political challenge during COVID-19?
Well, I I think what the question is implying is this dynamic and the tension between dealing with a global pandemic and incredible disruption caused by the political system. So there's a tension between what should be a response to a healthcare need that has been politicized. I mean, this is wearily in our news in the U.S. and globally on a daily basis. And, unfortunately, to politicize that response hurts those who are suffering from the illness. Now, at the same time, the only qualification is that the U.S. is so large and the 50 states by the Constitution have independent authority. That's why we've got a patchwork of responses. And it's inconsistent, and that's causing a lot of problems too. But that's not political. That's just the way the system is structured. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Illig. Now, if you have more questions, please write them down in the question answer window. But right now, I have a question for Mrs. Iris Ten. Many of us have lost our beloved because of COVID-19. So can you say us or give us any advice how to stay positive in this tough situation?
I believe that whatever it is, we all still have to take care of our own health. So there are precautions that we have to, to be mindful of and to make sure that we follow the SOPs of COVID. So if we have to stay back more often and not go out and meet people so close and meet too many people at one time, and also to wear your mask when you go out, I think we all have to observe that, because we don't know how bad this is going to be. But the most important now is for us all to take care of our own health. Now, some families may face the loss, but there's nothing we can do because it has happened. So what we have to be mindful of is to take care of those who are living. So all of us here have to make sure that we look after ourselves in much better ways. That's what I feel.
Thank you to Mrs. Tan. Now the next question I have for Dr. Gautam. Now people are talking very often about the changes. That changes are part of our lives. But when the COVID-19 happened, I realized they were not prepared to do any changes. They were not ready to change themselves. So can you give us the advice how to help them to accept this situation as a challenge and how to motivate them to do some changes in this time?
If I could answer that question, wouldn't they make me president? But I will try. I think that the motivation to change right now, there's a very famous concept. Many of you may have heard of it. It's known as the workforce of one, which means that when we are in HR or we are leaders of organizations, we sometimes tend to gloss over differences between individuals and treat them as one monolithic block. So, the example being, for example, the traditional way in which we think about, performance management and rewards in organizations. But one size has never fit all, and I think in pandemic it's even more so. I think we need to spend a little bit more time asking ourselves, what is at the heart of what provides meaning and purpose to our people? Even pre-pandemic, we had started talking about this question of purpose, etc. In fact, I think it was overdone to death. But now is the time for us to sit with our people and really get to the heart of, what is it that makes you get out of bed in the morning? And if the answer is, it's my children, then what type of world do you want to leave for your children? And others may not have children, and that's fine. And they may be motivated by a sense of of legacy, perhaps. So I guess my answer to that is to begin by doing a more fine-grained, a granular analysis of people in your team. So you remember the quadrant of crisis I talked about, right? The organization, the team, the interpersonal, and the individual. This is a conversation that belongs to the individual box. And you have to have an understanding of individuals around you as to what motivates them. And the final thing I guess I would say is, please understand human behavior lies on a bell curve, right? There will be those who will be the early adopters, as we call them in innovation, who you don't need to remind to put on a mask. And then at the other end, like, Peter was talking about people who, no matter what will happen, will be like, the COVIDiots, as we call them. They're protesting and they're not wearing masks, and because they think it's their freedom and all of that. And you probably may not have too much luck with them. So don't spend energy there. Try, but know that your odds are low. Focus your attention on the middle. That's where the real magic can happen. These are the people who you can still convert. These are the ones who are still listening. So focus on that. Workforce of one, and remember the bell curve when you're trying to change behavior. That would be my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Gautam. Now, my next question is for Dr. Peter Illig. Can you share with us if you have changed any habits because of the COVID? And you can say that was now a positive habit. It has some positive impact.
Right. Great question. Are there changes or adaptations that I have done, or perhaps I've observed, that actually have a positive result, even if they were forced upon me? I believe that the restrictions of interaction have led to more time with family. My children attend school virtually. Since March, they have not gone to school. Every day, they're on the computer, taking classes in small groups. What that has afforded me is the opportunity to be with my family. I think the biggest positive, if not blessing, is that I have more time to instruct, be present with, socialize, play, unstructured play. There's a lot of wonderful dynamics that have come in my personal relationships with my family. That would be the number one biggest positive contribution.
Thank you, Dr. Peter Illig. Now I have the same question for Mrs. Tan. So, if you have changed any habits this year of COVID, and if that was something positive for you?
I seem to be washing my hands more often nowadays, of course, and then try to be very clean all the time, clean the house, and even when you get into the car, you want to make sure whatever you touch is clean, and you try not to touch a lot of things outside. Of course, the other thing is I do a lot of cooking more often nowadays rather than before, and my children get to taste my food and eat home cooking more often these days, which I think is also healthier. And of course, the bonding is good for us because we are all spending more time at home.
Thank you. The next question also for Mrs. Tani. When the COVID will gone, when we will have again much more normal time. So will you keep some habits that you have changed in this time, also in the future?
So it's for me. Okay. I think for me, the habit that I picked up was actually I lost 10 kgs of weight. I started exercising.
Fantastic.
And I don't plan to pick it back up. So let's be very clear. What I do plan to keep is my exercise. And I'll tell you why that happened. Because I had lost so much control over life, right? I can't go see my parents that are in another country. I can't travel as much as I like. I lost a lot of the client work we were planning to do. Contracts were getting canceled left, right, and center. I said, what do I do have control over? You can go for a walk. Many countries, they can't even get out for a walk. So I went walking for all the people who couldn't go out for a walk. And the upshot of it was I lost weight. So I plan to continue walking. That's my change.
Thank you. Would anyone of our speakers would like to say anything else for the end? Some advice for our participants? Dr. Tanvi?
I think my advice for everybody on the call right now is have some compassion for yourself. You know, we are coming prior to 2020. The question we've always asked is, what's the performance? What's the productivity? What's the efficiency? I tell you what, my productivity, my efficiency, my performance is that I'm staying alive and I'm washing hands and putting on my mask and making sure everybody's staying alive. This is a pandemic. We really need to cut ourselves and everybody a little bit more slack. That includes your families and partners that you have been seeing the same people for the last, I don't know how many months, and you're sick of it, right? Be compassionate towards them. Be compassionate towards yourself. Be compassionate towards your colleagues. You have no idea what your colleagues are going through. This time, for the first time, when we lost a family member to COVID, for the first time in my life, I told my clients, I'm sorry, I can't show up. I am exhausted. I'm grieving. I can't show up. And all my clients huddled around me and they were like, we understand. People understand. Don't try and pretend to be braver than you need to be. You are human. Accept your humanity and accept the humanity of others. That would be my advice.
Thank you. Mr. Peter Illig, your advice?
Well, I also see I've received a question from one of the members of the audience asking about optimism and that support of resilience. So I think it's important I'd like to address that. Is optimism something that you're able to nurture and develop within an individual, or is it something innate? And I think the answer to both questions is yes. It is a mental state. It's an attitude. The word that really resonated for me when I was creating my presentation was seeing that optimism is an attitude, so it's a choice. But to be able to manifest that attitude requires an awareness. And I've heard a number of stories from our speakers about, despite the challenges, possessing and maintaining gratitude, focusing on the positive. It's really a choice. So it's an innate, I believe optimism is innate, but we must develop it through our attitude and our perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Illig. Now I would like to thank our speakers for their presentations and answers, as well as to all the participants for the questions. I hope this session was helpful and educating for all of you. Thank you to all the speakers and participants, and goodbye.